One of the more intriguing films to have been slated for release in 2025 was Death of a Unicorn. It just sounded like it had an original idea that was gonna hopefully blend horror and comedy in clever and interesting ways. I mean, it plays like a creature feature, which I feel like while in the past they've had the unfortunate stigma of being fun but weird, cheap, offbeat movies, basically the entirety of the Sci-Fi Channel, I feel like we've had some good entries recently. I mean, Infested was really awesome, Cobweb was also really good, and all the new kaiju movies have been pretty solid in their new universe. Death of a Unicorn stars Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega as a father and daughter who accidentally hit and kill a unicorn, accompanied with a quirky as hell ensemble cast, try to exploit the creature's powers. You know, as we normally do as a human race. And they soon realize that they've probably gotten more than what they bargained for. Honestly, this movie had a lot going for it. The premise was unique, the cast sounded fantastic. I mean, Paul Rudd is an American treasure, Jenna Ortega doesn't seem to miss in any of her performances. And then you throw in Will Poulter, who I've always enjoyed his performances. He just always knows how to play an absolute goober, and not in an annoying way either.
I don't think I should be in swim shorts for this moment.
But also, he's shown to play a more serious, straight-faced character just as well, like in The Bear. So this just had the blueprints to be such a blast of a film, but even with all the pieces, it just never measured up to what its potential could have been. You have a film about a dead magical Pokemon, a That's So Raven reference but like with a much bigger budget, such an expensive and talented cast, and you got the R rating approval, and yet the movie fumbled pretty much every aspect of its potential. The effects and kills looked horrible. They felt so cheap and quick, and it's so devastating because with an R rating you could have had such creative kills instead of this CGI nightmare. To contrast, some great examples are Christopher Landon's Freaky or Radio Silence's Ready or Not, both of which I love, and both capitalized on their rating and had great effects. In terms of characters, it sucks to say, but neither Jenna Ortega or Paul Rudd do anything noteworthy here. Honestly, with how over the top Will Poulter is and how amazing Anthony Carrigan is, Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega just get overshadowed. The film tries to have an albeit interesting but ultimately unfulfilled conversation about the roles children and parents have in a family dynamic. I mean, the literal beginning scene is a setup for Paul Rudd to decide whether he has to remain as the shoulder rest for his daughter or remove himself and get down to get his work papers from the floor at the expense of obviously no longer being the support for his daughter. Obviously, he chose to get his work papers because it's supposed to be symbolic of how he chooses his career over his family. I mean, literally, there's a scene in the movie where he says he would choose his career over his family. But they try and force an emotional payoff moment in the climax of the movie that just doesn't work. Firstly, because it's literally the worst time to have this conversation, and secondly, we just don't know these characters enough for that revelation to mean as much as it's supposed to mean. I wanted it to hit so much harder than it did, but it kind of just came out of nowhere. These characters felt so surface level, and somehow the Leopold family actually felt like a family, way more than Elliot and Ridley ever did. The Leopolds pretty much were always on the same page, and they just felt more real, if that makes sense. So I didn't really have too many complaints about them. Then again, when you have Richard E. Grant as the head of the family, I'd expect no less. Side note, I absolutely love the Leopold mansion. It looks so Victorian inspired, and it just looked beautiful. But yeah, somehow in a movie where bone residue is made into a metaphor for drugs, I was devastated that the movie didn't try to, maybe not necessarily turn itself into a body horror movie, but at least show us some of the bad side effects. The opportunity was right there, and I feel like the movie was too afraid to feel like it was gonna be too weird, but honestly I feel like it would have made it so much more interesting. You already had Ridley babbling on as the precocious teenager that nobody's gonna listen to, and since Elliot wasn't gonna have the backbone to support her, maybe that would have made it feel not so one-sided. And in that same vein of missed potential, I always love the use of bows and arrows in horror. I just feel like they're always so intense and scary, but this had the worst kind of payoff with a bow. It had literally the most pointless runner throughout the entire movie, just to have the lamest use of an arrow I've seen on screen. Despite the faults of the movie, there's still entertainment in the film. First and foremost, Anthony Carrigan was excellent. He stole the show in terms of comedic timing and just a great surrogate for playing and representing the viewer's reaction. It's just like he knows knows what you're thinking when you're watching all of these idiots, so he reacts based off of that awareness. And it's not even that his jokes were what stood out, it's just his physical movements were always so hilarious and sassy. I absolutely loved it. And even his departure towards the end, when he leaves the gates, I truly thought we were gonna have a Texas Chainsaw moment with the truck driver being cursed to keep running forever off screen. And honestly, the last 3 to 5 minutes were so stupid and pointless that I would have rathered him never come back, because it ultimately resulted in the same thing anyway. I also think the pacing of the movie is fine. You never feel like the movie's really dragging, because there's just always something so absurd on screen that you never feel bored, at least. I think despite this one not being great, I'm glad that A24 is trying to get more weird and have more original ideas instead of just doing franchise after franchise like most studios do. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.